U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening a 10% global tariff. This after his so-called Liberation Day import taxes were shot down by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long, that I can assure you.
Trump speaking this afternoon, putting world leaders on notice and railing against a decision, saying he was ashamed of certain Supreme Court justices. He also outlined legislation that could be used to bring other tariffs forward. Trump utilized America's International Emergency Economic Powers Act for the Liberation Day tariffs and fentanyl-related taxes put on Canada, Mexico, and China. The Supreme Court did not wade into whether companies' charges by these tariffs will be given a refund. As of December, the U.S. Treasury says it had collected over $133 billion from the tariffs. And here to dive into this Supreme Court ruling and reaction from the U.S. president is Peter Morrow, Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Toronto. Thanks for being with us today.
It's a pleasure.
Okay, let's start with that press conference from this afternoon, Trump's latest comments here and how he spoke about the options available to him, that this isn't over. How destabilizing could a 10% global tariff from the U.S. be?
It could do a little bit of damage. I think we're inching towards effective 10% tariffs by the U.S. where we are right now. But I think we should keep sight of the fact that it's very difficult to know what's going to happen going forward, and nothing's really assured one way or the other.
That really speaks to the uncertainty of trade talks. That's a word we've been using, the last 1 year plus. But how significant was the Supreme Court ruling, particularly for Canada, with taxes on auto and lumber sectors remaining in place?
So I think it cuts in two different ways. I think first, Canada should not think that this is over. There are lots of different tools that the U.S. administration has right now that can continue to impose tariffs. There's many different sections of established trade laws that President Trump can use, and we might see tariffs going forward. This is not over by any stretch of the imagination. But on the other hand, we have seen the U.S. Supreme Court take a stand in saying that an act is not legal and pushing back a little bit on some of his actions.
Yeah, we do have the ruling from the courts here, but when you factor in what President Trump said this afternoon, really you take a step back, and I got to ask, what weight does the U.S. Supreme Court's ruling hold here?
I think narrowly speaking, I'm not sure it holds a ton of weight. As I mentioned, there are a number of laws that President Trump can use to establish further tariffs, and this was not the only path open to him. And I think that if you look at markets today, the reaction is muted. People know that there are lots of different policies, and this is not over yet. So narrowly, I don't think it changes very much. But on a higher level, we are seeing the U.S. Supreme Court push back a little bit on some of his actions. And I think that there are some people who think that this is a harbinger of maybe a little bit more aggressive judicial pushback on some of his actions.
And, he's always speaking about the auto industry, for instance. He has a bone to pick with Canada over this auto industry. When you kind of look at the sector by sector, the impacts of these tariffs, what are you seeing when it comes to the Canadian economy?
I think of the Canadian economy, it's not outstanding by any stretch of the imagination. I think it still has a lot of the same problems related to productivity that it had before Trump came into office, but it has been relatively resilient in the face of this tremendous uncertainty that the Trump administration has ushered into economic relations.
Do you think there's any aspect of the ruling and Trump's response that on the Canadian side of things, our leaders here have to get some sort of clarification? I mean, if you were to give any advice here to our leaders, what would it be?
I think Prime Minister Carney knows exactly what's going on, and I think he's very clear-eyed about it. I think that this is just one small battle that has been resolved, and there's lots of other battles that are still coming up. The renewal of CUSMA is tremendously important, and we're going to hopefully have some clarity on what's going to happen there over the next couple of months.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Peter Morrow, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
It was an absolute pleasure.